My name is Linda, and I'm 30 years old. I run a successful tech company that I built from nothing, and I thought I had everything figured out. Most importantly, I thought I could trust my family with my life. I should have known something was wrong when my sister Rachel started being extra nice to me. For months, she had been calling me every day, asking about my business, my finances, and my insurance policies. She even convinced me to update my will, saying it was important for successful people like me to have everything in order. I thought she was just being a caring sister. Rachel had always been the jealous type. Growing up, she hated that I was good at school while she struggled. She hated that I went to college while she dropped out of high school. But I never thought her jealousy would turn into something so dark and evil. My husband David seemed to support Rachel's sudden interest in my affairs. He would nod along when she talked about insurance and wills, and he even helped her research different policies. I thought he was just being supportive of family bonding. David had always been quiet and agreeable, so his behavior didn't seem strange to me. The three of us had grown closer over the past year. We went on trips together, had dinner every week, and David and Rachel seemed to get along really well. Sometimes I would catch them whispering to each other, but when I asked what they were talking about, they would just smile and say they were planning surprises for me. Looking back now, I realized they were planning something all right, but it wasn't the kind of surprise any loving family member would plan. Everything started to unravel on what was supposed to be the most romantic day of my life. David had planned an amazing anniversary celebration for our 5th wedding anniversary. He told me he had booked a helicopter tour over the beautiful Maplewood Valley, followed by dinner at the fanciest restaurant in the city. I was so excited that morning. I put on my favorite blue dress and did my hair in loose curls. David looked handsome in his black suit, and he kept telling me how much he loved me and how special this day was going to be. Rachel came over to see us off, giving me the biggest hug and telling me how happy she was for us. The helicopter was beautiful and shiny, with big windows that would give us an amazing view of the valley below. The pilot, a friendly man named Captain Morrison, helped us into our seats and explained all the safety features. David sat next to me, holding my hand and pointing out landmarks as we took off. For the first 20 minutes of the flight, everything was perfect. The view was breathtaking, with rolling hills covered in green trees and a sparkling river winding through the valley below. David was taking pictures of us together, and I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. But then David started acting strange. He kept checking his watch and looking nervous. When I asked him what was wrong, he said he was just excited about the surprise he had planned for later. I believed him because I had no reason not to. As we flew higher over a particularly deep part of the valley, David suddenly stood up. I thought maybe he was going to propose again or do something romantic, but the look on his face wasn't loving at all. It was cold and determined, like I had never seen before. That's when the helicopter door suddenly slid open, and I felt hands pushing me toward the opening. The wind from the open helicopter door hit me like a wall, and I screamed as I felt myself being pushed toward the edge. For a split second, I couldn't believe what was happening. This had to be some kind of terrible accident. But then I saw David's face, and I knew it wasn't an accident at all. His eyes were cold and empty, like he was looking at a stranger instead of his wife of 5 years. He wasn't trying to save me or pull me back to safety. Instead, he was helping to push me out of the helicopter. My own husband, the man who had promised to love and protect me forever, was trying to kill me. I grabbed desperately at anything I could reach, but the helicopter was moving too fast and the wind was too strong. My fingers slipped off the metal frame of the door, and suddenly I was falling through the air, watching the helicopter get smaller and smaller above me. The ground rushed up toward me at terrifying speed. I could see the tops of tall pine trees getting closer and closer. I closed my eyes and prepared to die, thinking about how wrong I had been about the people I loved most. But sometimes when you think your story is over, life gives you a second chance. I crashed through the thick branches of the trees, which slowed my fall just enough to save my life. Branch after branch broke my descent tearing my dress and scratching my skin, but also preventing me from hitting the ground at full speed. I finally landed in a deep pile of leaves and soft earth near a small stream. Everything hurt and I could barely move. My left arm was definitely broken, and I had cuts and bruises all over my body. But I was alive and I was conscious enough to understand what had just happened to me. My sister and my husband had tried to murder me. I lay there in the forest for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of it all. Why would they want me dead? Then I remembered all of Rachel's questions about my insurance policies and my business. My company was worth millions of dollars, and my life insurance policy was worth $5 million. If I died, David would inherit everything as my husband, and Rachel was listed as the secondary beneficiary. They had planned this whole thing together. The romantic anniversary flight, the open helicopter door, everything. They wanted me dead so they could split my money and take over my business. As the sun started to set, I knew I had to find help. I managed to drag myself to the stream and drink some water. My phone was smashed from the fall, so I couldn't call anyone. I had to find my way out of this forest on my own. It took me 3 days to make it back to civilization. I walked during the day and hid under fallen logs at night. I ate berries and drank stream water. My broken arm throbbed constantly and every step was painful, but I kept going because I knew I had to survive. I had to make them pay for what they had done. When I finally stumbled onto a hiking trail, a family of campers found me and called for help. They rushed me to Greenfield General Hospital, where the doctors were amazed that I had survived such a terrible fall. They set my broken arm and treated my cuts and bruises, but they said it would take weeks for me to fully recover. While I was in the hospital, I learned something that made my blood boil with rage. The news was reporting that Linda Martinez, successful business owner, had tragically died in a helicopter accident during her anniversary celebration. They said my body had never been found, but that I was presumed dead after falling from such a great height. David was on the news, crying fake tears and talking about how much he missed his beloved wife. Rachel was right beside him, comforting him and talking about what a wonderful sister I had been. They were both dressed in black, playing the part of grieving family members perfectly. But the worst part was yet to come. The nurse told me that my funeral was scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own funeral was happening tomorrow, and the 2 people who tried to kill me were going to be there pretending to cry over my empty coffin. The nurse, Mrs. Patterson, saw the shocked look on my face and asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, but inside I was burning with anger. I had to get out of this hospital and stop them before they fooled everyone into believing their lies. But first, I needed to be smart about this. If I just showed up and accused them of trying to murder me, they would probably claim I was confused from my injuries. I needed proof and I needed a plan. That night, I snuck out of the hospital while the nurses were busy with other patients. My arm was still in a cast, and my body ached with every step, but I was determined to find out the truth. I took a taxi to my house, staying low in the back seat so the driver wouldn't recognize me from the news reports. When I got to my house, all the lights were on, and I could hear voices inside. I crept around to the back window and peeked through the curtains. What I saw made my stomach turn. David and Rachel were sitting at my kitchen table, celebrating with champagne and laughing. They had papers spread out all over the table, and I could see they were already planning how to divide up my money and sell my company. Rachel was wearing my expensive jewelry, and David had his feet up on my favorite chair like he owned the place. "I can't believe we actually pulled it off," Rachel said, raising her glass. $5 million, plus the company. We're going to be rich beyond our wildest dreams. David clinked his glass against hers. "I almost felt bad for a second when I saw the look on her face," he said. "But then I remembered how she always acted like she was better than everyone else. Now she's gone and we have everything." They talked for hours about their plans. Rachel wanted to sell my company to the highest bidder and move to California. David wanted to keep some of the business running so people wouldn't get suspicious. They had it all figured out, down to the smallest detail. I recorded everything on a small tape recorder I found in my car. Every evil word, every cruel laugh, every detail of their plan to steal my life's work. But I knew I needed more than just a recording. I needed to catch them in the act, in front of witnesses who couldn't deny what they had done. The next morning, I went to see my lawyer, Mr. Williams, who had helped me write my will. I wore sunglasses and a hat to disguise myself, and I told him I was Linda's cousin from out of town. He believed my story and showed me a copy of my will. Just as I suspected, David was the main beneficiary, and Rachel was listed as the backup in case something happened to David too. Mr. Williams also told me something that made me even angrier. David and Rachel had already been to his office that morning, asking about when they could access my bank accounts and start the process of selling my company. They weren't even waiting until after the funeral to start spending my money. I spent the rest of the day preparing for the biggest moment of my life. I bought a black dress and styled my hair differently so I would look as much like myself as possible. I practiced walking without limping, even though my injuries still hurt terribly. Most importantly, I called my best friend Jessica and my business partner Robert, telling them to meet me at the funeral but not to let anyone know I had contacted them. As evening approached, I drove to Riverside Memorial Chapel, where my funeral was being held. Cars were lined up outside, and I could see people in black clothes walking into the building. Some of them were crying, and others were talking quietly about what a tragedy it was that I had died so young. I parked across the street and watched as David and Rachel arrived together. David was wearing an expensive black suit that I had never seen before, probably bought with money from my accounts. Rachel was dressed in a black designer dress and was carrying the purse I had given her for her birthday last year. They walked into the chapel arm in arm, putting on a perfect show of grief for everyone to see. But I had seen them celebrating the night before, and I knew their tears were as fake as everything else about them. I waited until the service had started before I made my move. Through the chapel windows, I could see the pastor talking about what a wonderful person I had been, and how tragic it was that my life had been cut short. I could see David in the front row, holding a tissue to his eyes, and Rachel next to him, her head bowed in pretend sorrow. The chapel was packed with people from my company, old friends from college, and neighbors who had known me for years. Everyone believed that Linda Martinez was really dead, and they had come to pay their respects to my memory. But they were about to get the shock of their lives. I took a deep breath, checked my tape recorder one more time, and walked toward the chapel doors. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone would be able to hear it. This was my chance to expose David and Rachel for the evil, greedy killers they really were. As I reached for the door handle, I could hear the pastor asking if anyone wanted to say a few words about me. Through the glass, I saw David standing up, preparing to give a speech about his beloved wife who had died too soon. That's when I pushed open the doors and walked into my own funeral. The heavy chapel doors creaked as I pushed them open, and every single person in that room turned to look at me. For a moment, there was complete silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Then someone in the back gasped, and a woman near the door screamed. I walked slowly down the center aisle, my heels clicking on the marble floor. People were staring at me like they had seen a ghost, which I guess they had. Some people started whispering to each other, asking if they were seeing things. Others pulled out their phones to take pictures, probably thinking they were witnessing some kind of miracle. But the two people I was most interested in watching were frozen in shock at the front of the chapel. David's face had turned completely white, and his mouth was hanging open like he couldn't breathe. The tissue he had been using to fake his tears fell from his hand and fluttered to the floor. He gripped the edge of the pew so hard his knuckles turned white, and I could see his whole body shaking. Rachel looked even worse. Her fake crying had stopped immediately, and now she looked like she was about to throw up. Her expensive makeup was smeared from her pretend tears, and she kept blinking like she was trying to wake up from a nightmare. The purse she had stolen from me slipped from her hands and crashed to the floor. I stopped right in front of my own coffin and turned to face the crowd. Everyone was still staring at me in complete shock. My friend Jessica was crying real tears now, but they were tears of joy because she realized I was alive. My business partner Robert was grinning from ear to ear and started clapping. "Hello, everyone," I said in a clear, strong voice that carried throughout the chapel. "I'm sorry I'm late to my own funeral, but I had a little trouble getting here. You see, I've been recovering from being pushed out of a helicopter by my loving husband and sister." The crowd erupted in gasps and shouts. People started talking all at once, trying to understand what was happening. The pastor dropped his Bible and just stood there with his mouth open. Some people stood up to get a better look at me, while others sat down heavily in their seats like they might faint. But I wasn't done yet. I pulled out my tape recorder and held it up for everyone to see. "I have proof of everything," I announced. "Last night, I recorded David and Rachel celebrating my death and planning how to spend my money. Would you all like to hear what they really think about me?" I pressed play on the recorder, and Rachel's voice filled the chapel. "I can't believe we actually pulled it off. $5 million plus the company. We're going to be rich beyond our wildest dreams." Then David's voice. I almost felt bad for a second when I saw the look on her face. But then I remembered how she always acted like she was better than everyone else. Now she's gone, and we have everything. The crowd was getting angry now. People were shouting at David and Rachel, calling them murderers and thieves. Some of my friends from work stood up and started moving toward them. Jessica was crying and yelling about how she had always suspected something was wrong with David. David finally found his voice and stood up shakily. "Linda, honey, you're confused," he said, trying to sound caring but failing miserably. "You hit your head when you fell from the helicopter. You're not thinking clearly. We've been worried sick about you." "Really?" I said, crossing my arms. "Is that why you pushed me out of the helicopter door? Is that why you were celebrating with champagne last night? Is that why you were already planning to sell my company this morning?" Rachel tried a different approach. She started crying again, but this time the tears looked real because she was scared. "Linda, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "It was all David's idea. He forced me to help him. I never wanted to hurt you. You're my sister and I love you." But I knew she was lying. I had heard her laughing on the recording. I had seen her wearing my jewelry and planning her new life with my money. "Save it, Rachel," I said coldly. "I heard you both last night. You planned this together, and you were both excited about getting rich from my death." By now, several people had called the police on their phones. I could hear sirens in the distance, getting closer and closer. David and Rachel looked around desperately, like trapped animals looking for a way to escape. That's when David did something that shocked everyone in the chapel even more than my appearance had. He grabbed Rachel's arm and started dragging her toward the side door of the chapel. "We have to go now," he hissed at her, "before the police get here." But Rachel was wearing high heels, and she stumbled as he pulled her. She fell hard against one of the wooden pews, and I heard a sickening crack as her ankle twisted at a wrong angle. "My ankle!" she screamed. "David, help me. I can't walk." But David didn't help her. Instead, he looked down at her with the same cold expression he had given me right before pushing me out of the helicopter. "You're slowing me down," he said. Then he turned and ran toward the door, leaving Rachel crying on the floor with a broken ankle. The police sirens were getting louder now, and I could see flashing red and blue lights through the chapel windows. David reached the side door and yanked it open, but what he saw outside made him freeze in terror. 3 police cars were surrounding the chapel, and officers were already getting out with their weapons drawn. David slammed the door shut and spun around, his eyes wild with panic. He was trapped, and he knew it. The police had surrounded the building, and there was nowhere left to run. Sweat was pouring down his face, and his expensive black suit was wrinkled from his desperate attempt to escape. "This is all your fault," he screamed at me, pointing his finger like an angry child. "We had the perfect plan until you survived. You were supposed to die." The people in the chapel gasped at his confession. Even Rachel looked shocked that he had admitted everything so openly. She was still lying on the floor holding her broken ankle, but now she was staring at David like she was seeing him for the first time. "David, stop talking," she whispered desperately. "You're making it worse." But David had completely lost control. The stress of thinking he had gotten away with murder, combined with the shock of seeing me alive, had broken something inside his mind. "I'm tired of pretending," he yelled. "Yes, we planned to kill her. Yes, we wanted her money. She had everything while we had nothing. It wasn't fair." The chapel doors burst open, and 6 police officers rushed in with their guns drawn. "Everyone stay calm," shouted Officer Martinez, the lead detective. "Nobody move." David looked around frantically, then grabbed a heavy brass candlestick from the altar. "Stay back," he shouted at the police. "I'll hurt someone if you come any closer." But he had forgotten that the chapel was full of people who cared about me. My friend Jessica stepped forward, her face red with anger. "You already tried to hurt someone, you monster!" she yelled. "You tried to murder Linda." My business partner, Robert, stood up next to her. "How could you do this to someone who loved you?" he demanded. "Linda trusted you with her life." More and more people started standing up and shouting at David. My employees, my friends, even neighbors I barely knew were all united in their anger at what he had done. David spun around wildly, waving the candlestick, but he was outnumbered and surrounded. Officer Martinez saw his chance and moved quickly. While David was distracted by the angry crowd, the officer tackled him from behind. The candlestick flew across the room and crashed into a flower arrangement. Within seconds, 3 other officers had David on the ground in handcuffs. "David Thompson, you're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit fraud," Officer Martinez announced. "You have the right to remain silent." As they dragged David away, he kept screaming about how unfair his life had been and how I deserved what happened to me. But nobody was listening to his excuses anymore. Everyone could see him for what he really was, a greedy, evil man who had tried to kill his own wife for money. Rachel was still on the floor, crying and holding her ankle. When the paramedics arrived to check on her injury, Officer Martinez knelt down beside her. "Rachel Thompson," he said, using her married name since she had taken David's last name years ago. "You're also under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit fraud." "But I'm hurt." Rachel protested. "You can't arrest me. I need to go to the hospital." "You'll go to the hospital," Officer Martinez replied calmly, "and then you'll go to jail." As the paramedics put Rachel on a stretcher, she looked at me with tears streaming down her face. "Linda, please," she begged. "I'm your sister. We grew up together. You can't let them do this to me." I looked down at her, feeling a mixture of sadness and anger. This was the same person who used to braid my hair when we were little girls. The same person who had helped me study for my college entrance exams. But she was also the person who had planned my murder and celebrated my death. "You stopped being my sister the moment you decided my life was worth less than money," I told her quietly. The paramedics wheeled Rachel out of the chapel, and suddenly the room felt much calmer. People started hugging me and telling me how happy they were that I was alive. My employees promised to help me rebuild my company and make it stronger than ever. My friends made plans to celebrate my survival and my courage. But the best moment came when Officer Martinez handed me a document that made everything official. "With the evidence you've provided and the confessions we just witnessed," he said, "David and Rachel will be spending a very long time in prison. Your company, your money, and your life are completely safe now." 6 months later, I stood in a courtroom and watched as David and Rachel were sentenced to 25 years in prison each for attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. David tried to look sorry during his sentencing, but I could see the anger still burning in his eyes. Rachel cried and apologized, but the judge told her that trying to murder someone for money was one of the most serious crimes possible. My company became more successful than ever because the story of my survival inspired people all over the country. I started a foundation to help other people who had been betrayed by their families, and I wrote a book about the importance of choosing kindness over greed. Most importantly, I learned that the people who truly love you will never try to hurt you for any reason. Real family doesn't come from sharing the same blood or having the same last name. Real family comes from people who want to see you succeed and who would never trade your life for money. I may have lost a husband and a sister, but I gained something much more valuable, the knowledge that I'm stronger than I ever imagined, and that surviving the worst betrayal possible taught me who my real friends and family actually are. And sometimes when life tries to push you down, the best revenge is simply refusing to stay down and building an even better life than the one someone tried to take away from you.